Hi, everybody. Marc Summers, and today we're going to be talking to the very talented Josh Robert Thompson. We discuss impressions and auditioning and expectations and Zen and the art of anger. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe to Marc Summers Unwraps. How bad do you want to be in this business? If you want to be in it that bad, drop everything and come out here. And that's why most people can't do it, because responsibility, I got to pay the rent, I got a car payment, I got a job. I came out here, I didn't have a job, you know?
You had the will to work really hard.
Yeah, and I talked myself into a page job at CBS, okay?
The confidence artist again.
Yeah. I didn't know anybody there, and I got an interview, and, you know, I became a page. They weren't hiring pages, but I got in.
And motivation throughout all of that was just onwards, commitment to it.
Once I got into CBS Television City, and I was there amongst the Carol Burnett Show and Sonny and Cher and All in the Family, I was in pig heaven because I went up to everybody and talked to them. I've talked to Norman Lear, and I talked to, Picca. I was invited to Carol Burnett's Christmas party. You know who was a big mentor? Bert Convy. Bert Convy was hosting a show called Tattletales, and I was the head usher, head page, and I just went in the dressing room one day and said, I want to be you. How do I do that? And he was the nicest guy in the world and took me under his wing and helped me. And eventually when I became on television and he was hosting another show and I was a guest on his show, that was the weirdest feeling because I went from page to how do I do this to doing it, and now I'm a guest on his game show that he's hosting. And I got a phone call early on in the infomercial days to do an infomercial. And I didn't know what to do. They offered me a lot of money. And I thought, well, maybe I should. But it had such a negative tone to it. The only person who was able to get through back in the day, Cher had some crazy-ass infomercial on. I think it was about hair or makeup. And somehow she was allowed to do it. But she was Cher. She had all the money in the world. She was this big star, and she got away with it. And so I remember after the show, I went into Bert's dressing room, and I said, I have a problem. I don't know what to do. And he said, what's the question? I said, I got called to do this infomercial, and they offered me a boatload of money, but something in the back of my head says not to do it. And he said, do you need the money? And I said, no. And he said, say no. Mm-hmm. And I said no. And I trusted him because he had been on first Broadway show I saw was Fiddler on the Roof, and he was playing Muttle the Tailor. I was 14 years old. Here he was on Broadway. Then he started doing movies. And then he did Tattletales, and he did Win, Lose, or Draw. He was a producer on that. So here was this guy who just was doing everything. And I figured, well, as a performer, he would know what the right thing to do is. And I went in and he said, do you need the money? No. Walk away. And I did.
With all those great influences, did you ever meet a celebrity crush? Did you ever have a celebrity crush and then meet them?
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy
Stewart. Yes. Hi, everybody. Marc Summers here today, and today we're unwrapping somebody who you know but you don't know. His name is Josh Robert Thompson, and in a few moments you're going to say, oh, yeah, that guy, that's the guy. I love the internet, and I hate the internet. Let me tell you why I love it. I was trying to track this gentleman down, and through direct message and all sorts of things, I just sent a little note and said, hey, here's what I want to do, and, here's who I am. And he got back to me right away, and now he's sitting across from me on our podcast. So today we're unwrapping Josh Robert Thompson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited that you are here for so many reasons. The first being, you're so damn talented, and I admire that off the bat. We'll get to your pilot, which you were nice enough to send me, and I looked at it. And here's the tease for the people who are listening. It's a cross between Jonathan Winters and Robin Williams. You had a passion for, I guess, voices.
Yeah.
And tell me about your tape recorder and watching TV and how this whole thing started. I love this story.
Well, growing up an only child, I wasn't into sports, so I grew up in Cleveland, not into sports, which,
That's difficult.
Well, I mean, sort of. Not the best teams in the world, so, it wasn't that hard for me to not be that excited about sports, but only child and had a lot of time to myself. So I grew up watching The Muppet Show, and I would start to repeat the voices that I heard in that show into my tape recorder.
What was the first voice you did?
Probably Kermit the Frog, just trying to sort of mimic what I saw on screen. But then later realizing, maybe watching the credits or picking up a book at the library about the Muppets, that, oh, these are adults that are doing these voices. You'd see in the credits like Frank Oz, and you'd realize, or I realized as a kid, oh, Frank Oz does multiple characters.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how's that possible? And so I started to do that. And I also, the big thing about growing up in Cleveland at that time in the 80s was the late night horror movie show.
Ghoulardi was on?
Ghoulardi was not on. Ghoulardi was before my time in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the great Ernie Anderson,
Yeah.
of course, who later would go on to be
The
the
voice.
the
Yeah.
voice of ABC, right?
And God knows what else.
I mean, it was just, on
And
an
from
all-new
Cleveland,
Love Boat. Yeah.
It was Ernie Anderson, a guy by the name of Woody Frazier,
Yeah.
who taught me the business,
Okay.
and Tim Conway.
Tim Conway.
So 3 huge talents.
Yeah. But when I grew up, Ghoulardi or Ernie had already left Cleveland and was already a mega voiceover guy.
He was the guy who would go, the Love Boat.
That was
right?
it. Yeah. Done an all new MacGyver.
Yeah.
Or on America's Funniest Home Videos, who will win? Will it be baby who crapped her pants? Dog who shit in the toilet? Coming up next. I'd be like, that guy's amazing.
Well, he had this unique delivery.
He did, and he was very funny. And the thing about Ghoulardi was he had big balls.
Yeah.
When he was in Cleveland doing local TV, he not only did Ghoulardi, but he did a send-up of soap operas called Parma Place. I grew up in Parma, Ohio.
Oh, I didn't know
which is
this.
a suburb of Cleveland. Very controversial at that time because it really ripped on Parma and the Polish community, and it was a real satire of those people. And I think they had it pulled off the air because, somebody complained to the local newspaper.
Really?
Yeah, so he was doing that kind of satire at that time. But like me, Ernie wanted to get out of there. He wanted to get out of Cleveland. Even Tim Conway was like, I think they may have moved out together.
Oh, that I didn't know. I know Woody
they
was
lived-
doing the Mike Douglas show initially
Yeah.
there, and then moved to Philly, and then finally L.A. and New York and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, same way. When I was in Indianapolis, I realized I was never going to be a big star staying in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
So I had to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And so I guess those guys thought the same way.
Although the guys that we had were Chuck Shadowski and John Rinaldi, known as Big Chuck and Little John. John
Oh.
Rinaldi owned Rinaldi Jewelers in downtown Cleveland. And Big Chuck, or Chuck Shadowski, had been a PA on the Ghoulardi show.
Oh, really?
And he was in Cleveland television for over 40 years. So he was one of my heroes. I watched the Big Chuck and Little John show, right? And it was hey, gang, we got a real corker for you tonight. It's another crappy movie. But it wasn't just movies. They would do sketches. So these guys would dress up as different characters, and they would have these really funny, well, to me at the time, very sophomoric humor, but very, very funny sketches that would rip on the local community. And
I miss
you know.
that stuff. Local stations used to, give you freeform, creativity to just go out
Yeah.
and do stuff.
Yeah, man.
And now it's, let's just throw up a syndicated show.
You don't have that anymore.
Never.
I mean, the closest we have is, city council meetings,
Yeah.
which I love so much. And I'll get to that. Public access is where I sort of cut my teeth, and learned all this stuff. And also the car commercials. I think on KTLA early in the mornings on Sundays, they would have dealerships do like broadcasts from their shops,
Yep.
from their places. And it'd be like a half-hour show, like, we're back and we're live and we're selling this Pinto and we got a guy dressed like a chicken. And it was still, or Wally George. Wally
Yeah.
George, was that KDOC?
Yes, and he did a show called Wally George's Hollywood Showcase.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the first guest on that.
Were you really?
I was doing magic at the time. Oh, man. And I was a guest on, and there was a sponsor who did kitchens.
Uh-huh.
And his line was, I'm just itching to do your kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's beautiful.
And the other one was a place that sold mobile homes, and it was Home Mobile World.
Whoa,
Careful.
easy.
Yeah, Home Mobile World, I remember. Yeah, that was about, I moved out here in 73, so that was like 1974.
So that's when you did. That's when he was doing that.
That's
show.
when he was doing that thing, and it may have been on KCOP at the time, and they couldn't find people, and so they came to the Magic Castle and saw my act and asked me if I would be on it. And of course, I didn't get past the first round.
Right.
But I was on TV in California. I thought
So
that
this was
great.
before Hot Seat. This is before Wally Georgia had a show called Hot
Oh,
Seat.
long before that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a personality around for a long time.
And you were at the castle?
I worked the Magic Castle from the time I got here in 1973 until the early 80s. I became a regular at the Comedy Store in 76. And
Okay.
so I left Magic. I'm opening for Gallagher.
Oh,
at
yeah?
At a place called, let's see, where was I? I was at, oh man, it was in Newport Beach, and I can't, the Magic and Comedy Club.
Yeah, you're
And,
right.
I was working down there opening for Gallagher, and I was doing Magic. And my real name is Mark Berkowitz. He said, "Hey, Berkowitz, come here." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "How much they paying you to open for me?" And I said, "They're paying me $150." He says, "Hey, you're an asshole." And I said, "Explain me why." And he goes, "Because you're out there with all those props." Now, this is a prop comic, and he tells me, "You're out there with all those props."
Yeah, right.
And I said, "Well, I don't understand." He goes, "You go out there cutting those ropes and doing those card tricks, and they pay you as a novelty act, but stand-ups are open to me for $300. So when I found out that being a novelty act was taking money away from me,
Oh.
I stopped doing Magic and started doing stand-up
Okay.
and became a regular at the Comedy Store in 76. And so, now it was much easier, I thought, back then to do stand-up and do these things, because now everybody thinks they're a stand-up comic, and there's thousands of them.
Yeah.
But when I would stand in line on Monday nights, there was maybe 50 of us, if that many. And most of us would get on a Monday night, and if not, they'd say, "You didn't get on this Monday, we'll put you on next Monday," kind of thing. Now, if you go stand in line, I think there's 1,000 people who think they're funny.
Yeah,
you know?
right, yeah.
Man.
But how did that go for you? I mean, you did it for a while? Or?
Yeah. Well, I put myself through college as a professional magician, so I did that initially.
Okay.
And then I did stand-up, and I started doing warm-ups on television shows.
Yeah.
And I backed into that in a strange thing. Started on the Mac Davis Show, and I did Star Search and Webster and What's Happening Now and Alice and
Star
Soap.
Search.
Oh, yeah, I did Star Search first year with Ed McMahon and all that stuff.
man.
And, but I was always frustrated because I wanted to be in front of the camera. I
Yes.
didn't want to be behind the camera. But I became known as the king of warm-ups, and I was doing soap. Now, think about this. I'm doing soap on this stage over at Sunset Gower Studios. To the left of me, Barney Miller was shooting with a live audience when they started. Dave Letterman was the warm-up guy on Barney Miller. And to the right of me, they were doing Bosom Buddies, and Bob Saget was doing the warm-ups on Bosom Buddies. So warm-up was the way to get in the
Yeah,
door,
okay.
hoping
Interesting.
that somebody would discover you
Right.
and go from there. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But it was the best. It's like being in the minors trying to get to the majors.
Yeah.
And so, that was the dream, that somebody would say, "Oh, that guy's funny." But what was happening, I was doing so well on the warm-ups, other shows would come and watch me and then want to hire me. Gary Shandling was doing the warm-ups on Alice, and they didn't want him there anymore. And so they came and saw me on Soap, and I was doing well. So the next thing you know, I'm doing the warm-ups on Alice. I was doing... Think about this. On weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, I was doing a show called Anything for Money, a game show. Fred Travellino was the host.
Oh, Freddie.
He's a good guy. Mondays, I had off. Tuesdays, I did Alice. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I did Our Magazine during the day. Wednesday night and Thursday night, I did Star Search. Friday, I did Soap. When Soap got canceled, I did Webster. When Webster got canceled, I did What's Happening Now.
Oh, yeah.
And then I did game shows on the weekend, and Monday was my day off. And I was making six figures back before anybody knew that existed.
Right.
But I was so damn frustrated because I didn't want to say, "Hey, where you from?" and do my shtick.
Boy.
I wanted to get in front.
You are preaching to the choir, man.
It's tough, right?
That's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about, which is, you end up, this path sort of chooses you. You sort of fall into this thing.
You have no control of your
and
own
you're
life.
good at it. You're just like, well, I'm good at it.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to keep doing it. But all the while, you're like, yeah, but I really don't want to do this. I'm laughing thinking about Gary Shandling doing warm-up. What was a Gary Shandling warm-up like?
How's my hair? Is my hair
Like,
good?
people are miserable.
Yeah. Well, the producers were miserable. That's
But
why they hired
they
me.
got rid of him. I was like, well, that must be why. I mean, this esoteric material to these middle Americans that are like, I just want to laugh.
Yeah,
you
right.
know?
And it just, and the producers on Alice were Madeline David and Bob Carroll Jr., who wrote I Love Lucy. And if you go back and look at the Alice episodes, they were all rehashes of old I Love Lucy episodes,
Right.
basically.
Yes.
It's just so funny to think about that stuff. And the audiences were older. In fact, I wasn't esoteric, but they got tired of my material. And Bob Carroll wrote me, if you're ready for this, in 1990, a radio show that he wanted me to hand out scripts and have the audience read it. Well, we did that for 1 week.
Yeah, what year is
And this is like, let's see, my son was born in like 84, 85.
Right.
Okay, and if they hated me, they really hated trying to do a radio show.
Mark, I'd like to do a radio show. It's Theater of the Mind. Now, it's a murder mystery play, and it's a weekly show. What?
I know.
What are you saying?
All that stuff is so bizarre when you think
I love
about
that
it.
stuff, though. I mean, I was steeped in that. Like I listened to A Prairie Home Companion when I was a kid.
Sure.
And then that led me to comedy albums. So
Oh.
Cheech and Chong,
Okay.
Bob and Doug McKenzie's Great White North album, which then led me to SCTV. And SCTV blew open the doors.
It did. The best sketch in the history of all of television is the SCTV where they do Perry Como.
Perry Como. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Catch a falling star and put it in. I mean, I can watch that over.
Is that
and over.
Rick? Is it Rick
Rick
Moranis?
Yeah, he was playing Perry Como.
I love that one, and then my absolute favorite is the Leave It to Beaver reunion special
Yeah,
with
hysterical.
Joe Flaherty as Hugh Beaumont,
Yep.
who can barely stand because he's putting whiskey in his cereal in the morning, and Beaver, played by the great John Candy, ends up killing. I think he kills Eddie Haskell.
Yeah.
I think he kills him because he can't take it. Or Whitey. Whitey's his friend.
You're right.
Anyway, watching that and seeing these different actors week after week. Again, I was very young, and I watched it reruns on TV 61 in Cleveland on my parents' black and white tube TV.
Sure.
And TV 61, which then became like QVC eventually, as many of those channels did. TV 61 played. SCTV had a thing called Network 90, which was a 90-minute repackaging of a lot of old stuff.
Don't remember that.
And then some new things they did, like long-form movie parodies, like Love Italian Style, which was brilliant, but all dubbed in so they would pretend to speak, and then they dub
funny.
themselves in. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't quite get it. The same with Fire Sign Theater. I used to listen to those albums. I didn't understand it, but I knew there was something sonically. There was something about that theater of the mind that suddenly made me obsessed with sound and recording sound and mimicking my own, hearing my own voice played back was magical. Back when you had a tape recorder and you went, oh my God, I just did that and I can hear it. And
do you have any of those tapes from when you were a
I
kid?
do.
You do.
I have everything.
So was Kermit your first impression?
I think it was Kermit.
And if you play it back now, do you go, that's pretty good? Or do
Yeah, I
you
go, well, it needs work.
needs work, huh?
Johnny Carson was my first really big one
Okay.
because, Johnny was at the height.
Yep.
It was 80s for me. Obviously, I think the 70s was probably the high point, but the 80s was fantastic.
Sure.
And I would do my Johnny Carson. I would call into college radio, Cleveland State University. I would call in, and there was a show Thursday nights called Swamp Radio. And the conceit was we were all in a swamp. When they took phone calls, you would hear the sound effect of what sounded like a swamp or a marsh with frogs and crickets. And they would put us out onto the air one by one. And this was back when nobody called in and swore or did a prank. They would read poems. I would do my impressions. Kids would tell stories. It was
So you call as Johnny?
I would call in as retired Johnny Carson. This is in 1992. So it was May 92. The show ended.
Right.
And it was just Johnny looking for work. But it's like, it's like 15 or 16-year-old me doing Johnny Carson.
fun.
So, guys, I'm just sitting here. I got nothing to do. So I'm wondering if you guys can help me out. We'd love to be on your show. And, so this guy, Chaz Smith, no longer with us, but he was a professor of rock and roll studies at Cleveland State University, but also happened to host this show, Swamp Radio. And every week I'd call in. And sometimes he used to talk to me off the air, and he'd say, you're really funny. You're a funny kid. And I was like, oh, thanks, mister. I don't know what to do with that information, but thanks.
Well, thank you.
But years later, we became friends, and I told him, that was by the point I'd started doing the Late Late Show, and he was like, man, it's amazing to think that you started calling in as this little punk all those years ago. So radio and local TV for me are very near and dear to my heart. That's really important.
When people say to me, I'm graduating from college, should I move to New York or LA? And I say, move to Toledo.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to start at the top.
Yeah.
So I was intrigued by Impressionists. I guess my favorite was and probably still is is John Biner. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And Biner used to put me on the floor. I got to work with him for a couple years on Soap, and we played a role on that. And he used to do the best Ed Sullivan of any person. And I used to. That was my first impression was Sullivan. And John said the way you tune your ear to the proper Ed Sullivan are by saying the words "and now you know," and he'll go, "And now you know." Now you know right here on our show, and
That was his way in.
that was his way
Yeah,
that he would
yeah.
start doing
Yep.
it, and he was absolutely dropped at his. I couldn't wait for him. Frank Gorshin was weird, but beyond, he looked like each person that he did.
Right.
I don't know if he was
Transformed.
funny, but he was spot on
Right.
with his impressions. But it doesn't seem to be an art that as anybody cares or recognizes anymore.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was Rich Little. You know, when I was growing up, I caught the tail end of the variety show era. So I had Circus of the Stars,
Oh, yeah.
the Mandrell Sisters.
Oh, yeah.
I think Tim Conway had a show.
He had many.
But it was the last one. It was the very last one, the Smothers Brothers
Oh, yeah.
and the Muppets. So I caught the late 70s tail end of all of that. And, those guys. And also Fred Travellina.
Yeah, Fred was a sweet guy. Died of cancer. In fact,
Yeah.
when I got diagnosed, he was in. We had the same oncologist, and he was in the room with me. And I hadn't seen him in years. I was doing the warm up on Anything for Money, and I'm sitting there like nervous, first day in the oncologist's office, and all of a sudden this guy starts. He said, "Mark," and I look up. I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Mark," and then he takes a hat and starts beating the crap out of me. He said, "Mark," and now he's totally bald. He said, "It's Fred," and I said, "Oh, geez, I had no idea."
Wow.
And he used to do impressions from back in the days, my answering machine, as Michael Caine.
Oh, yeah.
And just more obscure stuff. And he was fantastic.
He was brilliant. He was brilliant, and I used to watch A&E's and Evening at the Improv, and Bud Friedman would come out and host that.
Yes.
Good evening, folks. We got a great show. And so this is when I was a kid. Evening at the Improv, I think, was on every night on A&E.
Yes, it was.
That's where I really learned about stand-up. That's where I saw guys like Fred Travellina and Brian Regan. And I remember Fred Travellina did a joke. It was Sammy Davis Jr. doing a commercial for Memorex. It was his classic bit where he sang and was singing as Sammy Davis Jr. and then hit the high note and then made it like his glass eye shattered. And I just thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And Fred Wolf, who is a hilarious writer and does a lot of films with David Spade, he had an incredibly unusual stand-up routine that was so bizarre, and it made me realize, oh, wow, you can do it that way too. A&E's and Evening at the Improv was an amazing showcase or overview of all the different ways, like Judy Tenuta, Emo Phillips. I mean, this was right in the heyday. This was probably, I'm going to say 86, 87.
Right. It was right in that. My first stand-up show I did was Norm Crosby's comedy show.
Okay.
That was my first national thing. And I remember they had a celebrity introduce the last act, and I was the last act, and it was Dick Martin. And he comes to me right before going, he goes, "I have no idea who you are. I've never seen your act. What do you want me to say about you?" And and he comes out and goes, "Here's a guy I know and love, and I've seen him many times. Welcome,
Brilliant. Professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. All these guys.
I mean, it was old school, but it was amazing.
That's incredible,
Yeah.
man. And so you doubled there. This is what's interesting to me is, and I wanted to ask you this. Were you at that time one of the younger game show hosts? Because a lot of those dudes were aging out.
Well, yeah, here
that
was the deal.
tail end.
I came out to Los Angeles in 1973 wanting to be a game show host.
Okay.
But they used to tell me I looked like a Boy Scout. Come back when you have gray hair and wrinkles.
There it is.
That's what they used to say to me all the time.
Right.
So I would go into these auditions, and they'd laugh at me because it was Tom Kennedy and Bob Barker and who else? I'm trying to think who else did it. Gene, God, I can't think of half the guys who did it. Jack Barry.
Right.
And these guys had been around for a while, and they
Yes.
weren't letting any of the new guys in. Peter Marshall was doing it at that time
yeah.
as well. Sweetest guy in the world, still around, 96 years old. And I couldn't get arrested. So I started writing game shows. My first job was writing Truth or Consequences. The last year Bob Barker was the host.
Okay.
And everybody who was on that show had done the radio version, okay? So they were old. You could walk into the writers' meeting and you hear the arteries hardening in the room, okay? And so they hired me for, quote, new blood.
Yes.
But they would never listen to any damn thing I ever pitched.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
okay.
part of the deal was they would all try to get themselves into some of the bits because then they get their after money and P&W.
Yeah.
And so anytime I try to suggest myself, oh, absolutely not, they put themselves in the thing. So they came to me. It was the week before Thanksgiving. I'll never forget this, 1974. And I had just gotten married, and they said to me, you better get your stuff together. You got one more week, and if you don't get something on the show, we're going to fire you. So I went home and said to my wife, I'm going to lose this job if I don't come up with something. They wanted something weird, something crazy, something wild. So this was the bit I came up with. And if you don't remember Truth or Consequences, the deal was silly stunts to try to get them accomplished to win, a washer dryer. Yeah. So I went in and pitched this into the meeting where you put chicken parts in one of those like swimming pools that kids have, breasts and legs and thighs and all that stuff. And you bring out two people from the audience and you give them a needle and thread, and the person who sewed the most chickens back together at the end of the half hour won. That's what got me fired.
That got you fired?
That got me fired. They thought that was...
sew the chicken?
They thought that was the worst thing.
This is like Steve Allen.
Yeah, no, they
Don't they get it?
They threw me out, okay? And the same week, I was doing warm-ups on Joker's Wild, and Jack fired me. So in 1 week, I lost my warm-up job on Joker, and I lost my writing job on Truth or Consequences. Wow. There I was married, and the only income I had was as a magician at the Magic Castle, doing 28 shows a week for $145.
Perfect.
Okay, yeah, it was perfect. And so you say, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? And I had 1 foot out the door. A friend of mine from Cape Town, South Africa, that I went to college with, had a smoked salmon business, and I was out selling smoked salmon. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine who was a ventriloquist in Indianapolis, Dave Garrison, called me and goes, you know what? I don't think I want to do this performing anymore. I just got this phone call from some network I never heard of called Nickelodeon, and some game show, I don't know what it is. Why don't you go instead of me? And so I went to this audition, and they said, Dave Garrison? I said, well, Dave couldn't make it. My name is Marc Summers. Can I audition? And yeah, sure. And I don't think you'd do that today. And I went in and did the audition, and it went extremely well, and I got 3 callbacks, and they had auditioned 1,000 people in New York and 1,000 people in L.A., and I got the job, and it changed my life.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was 34 years old, had 1 foot out the door, and said, I guess... I was doing warm-ups on a show called Hour Magazine, and Gary Collins, who was the host, said to me, unless you're the most unlucky human in the world, if you have the passion and hang in long enough, something's going to happen. But when you're 34 and have a mortgage payment and 2 kids, you go, I don't know if this is going to happen, and better get a job or something.
Of course.
And then Double Dare came, and it's all been pretty crazy and fun since then.
It's amazing because I didn't realize it as a kid. It didn't connect with me, but now I understand. Seeing you as a host as a kid was very appealing for me, because I didn't really know who these old guys were.
Yeah.
I think the youngest we had was John Davidson or Bert Convey was fairly young, So that was kind of an amazing thing to see, to go, wait a minute.
Well, focus groups,
this guy.
Kids thought I was either an older brother or their uncle.
Okay.
Which worked out great. And in my contract, I was not allowed to say that I was married or had kids.
Right.
Because focus groups thought I was 25. I was 34, and I wasn't allowed to talk about that.
That's amazing.
And then finally, things leaked out, and one thing came into another.
We at the same time, I think I was about 32 or 33 when I got the Late Late Show.
So the Late Late Show.
That's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, well, geez, so many great stories you have. So do Kermit for me. That was your first impression.
You don't
do it anymore?
I don't, hey, it's terrible. Hi, I'm Kermit the Frog. I mean, that's all I got. I got nothing. By the way, folks, that's about as good as it was when I was 7 or whatever.
Is there an impression that you've always wanted to do that you haven't been able to accomplish?
Oh, there's a lot, I'm sure.
Really?
Yeah, and it's funny, because like Family Guy, I've been doing Family Guy for a decade.
Okay, what characters on Family Guy?
So, there's so many. They'll basically, the producers over there are amazing. Rich Appel, Alex Sulkin, obviously Seth MacFarlane. Everybody over there is amazing. And now it's at a point now where they just go, we'll have Josh do it. The new season, I play Tom Selleck.
Oh, my.
And I go, Tom Selleck. They go, you can figure it out. Okay, great. When are we recording? Tomorrow morning. Okay, great. Well, I can't say the bit, but when you see it, it's really funny. Essentially, the real basics of it are Tom Selleck and what's his name? Sam Elliott have this long sort of feud kind of thing. Sam Elliott's character. Anyway, So I started watching Tom Selleck.
Are you watching Blue Bloods when you go home? Is that what
Yeah,
you-
I started watching the commercials, the life
Oh,
insurance
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So I noticed it was kind of this, hi, I'm Tom Selleck. Come on, have a seat. Let's talk about life. There's this like throat, this kind of thing that he does. There's almost like a bubble in his throat.
Yeah.
And he's always smiling. I'm Tom Selleck. So the thing about Family Guy is it doesn't have to be perfect, but close enough. And I just started doing it. And then, I mean, when we finally recorded it, it was a laugh riot. James Taylor. I played James Taylor in an upcoming
really?
episode. Yeah.
So how do you do James Taylor?
Start watching interviews of James Taylor, but do a comical version of him where it's kind of like, hey, how's it going, you guys? It's me. But it's James Taylor yelling. So like, don't tell me that, lady. I'm sick of your shit. Whatever it is. Kind of sounds like my Kermit the Frog, to be honest with you. So, but it's the funny thing about impressions is I used to love them a lot more than I don't dislike them at all.
Right.
But I'm realizing as I get older, you want different things. It's
Yeah.
the same thing as you're doing a warm-up bit and you
Not
want
wanting
to be on camera.
Yeah.
I want to get out from behind that wall.
Right.
So when I was on the Late Late Show,
Let's talk about. Hold
You
on.
know.
Let's take 2 steps back because I
But
want to get to
anyway,
that.
yeah.
You're in Chino, right?
Chino.
Now tell people where Chino is.
Chino is where is it? It's on the way to the desert. It's almost like Brigadoon. It doesn't exist. I think if you sing, it kind of appears.
It shows
is that
up.
what it is?
That's kind of like that.
There are cows, and there's the men's prison. So when I moved to L.A., I moved with my mother and father. My dad got this job opportunity, and I was like, look, I don't want to live in Cleveland anymore. So this is December of '95
Okay.
when I came out here and we moved to Chino. I mean, you go from Cleveland to Chino.
Good God. I never thought of it. Cleveland was actually better.
It was. And that was
what
my
was your-
reference. Like, this is California?
What was your dad doing?
I still don't know to this day.
Really?
But he worked for some company and sells precise measuring instruments.
Of
That's
course he
all I
does.
know. I'm now the regional manager, boy. Pack your things. Okay. And but in Chino, just near the men's prison, in the middle of nowhere, in a cul-de-sac, was this nondescript warehouse. And inside that warehouse was a production studio with equipment that by that point was already, a
100 years
decade
old.
right, exactly. So I started volunteering at the station in '96. And how I found it was I was watching the old tube TV, and on channel 16 was the bulletin board channel. Channel 16 was the PowerPoint presentation with, I think it was the Cable News Network. You would hear like a radio show playing. And,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
they're like,
Oh,
welcome
my.
back to the Cable News Network, and we've got a special guest, George Putnam, or one of these guys. And but they'd have like bake sale, the Kiwanis Club Thursday meeting. And then this ad popped up that said, volunteers wanted for local TV station. And I could not have called that number quick enough. And the guy that was running the studio at that time, this blows my mind. The guy that was running the show over in Chino at that TV station was Chris Little, who has been the news director at KFI AM 640 for decades.
Really?
Chris Little, KFI AM 640. Chris Little was just this guy that was like, all right, man, grab camera 2 and let's go to work. And we did shows like, hi, I'm Congressman Fred Aguirre, and today we'll be talking to, this guy about the local tetherball was vandalized at the Chino High School. And, I'd sit there, camera 2, push in, sweating bullets, So I learned for about a year how to do that. And then I started doing my own shows. Late night horror movie show.
You did. So you wrote them yourselves, you produced them yourself?
Yeah.
Because there was no
built
budget.
the sets. I built I had a dungeon set when I quit Blockbuster Video. The VHS cover boxes. You'd walk along the new release wall. You'd grab the cover box.
Yep.
Inside those boxes was a rectangular piece of styrofoam. Well, when we got rid of those movies, the boxes, they'd throw bags of styrofoam bricks away, and I'd just take them home. Glued them one by one to these big pieces of cardboard. Painted them green, kind of made them look like bricks, put some cobwebs on it, and you had Schlock Theater. That was the name of my show.
God.
Hey kids, it's Lou Schlock, and I had a cable-controlled puppet on my shoulder who was my sidekick.
Really?
Timmy the Troll. I was my own sidekick controlling it because this guy Jeff Baker, who worked at that studio. He did a show called The Man in the Kitchen. In fact, that was the winery I was visiting. Was his
Oh, no
family,
kidding.
his winery.
We're talking about when I first called you. You said
right.
you're going up to a winery in Santa Barbara.
Exactly. And so Jeff Baker, the man in the kitchen, he had like this beautiful kitchen set with a working kitchen and a working stove. And he was doing a show at the same studio called Man in the Kitchen. Well, he became the program director when Chris Little left. And when I did Schlock Theater, I tried out a number of human sidekicks. I actually brought in real people to try it, and it just never gelled.
worked.
Jeff was the first guy to pull me aside and go, you know what?
You don't need them.
You don't need one. And I said, okay. And man, that was it. I just started like cranking out that show, the Josh Robert Thompson show, which was a variety show, all shot on green screen with puppets, and and I learned. I just figured it all out.
And how old were you now?
Oh, I was 23
23,
when I
right.
started doing like Cooking with Robert De Niro, the very first version, using Jeff's set. I said, Jeff, can we use your kitchen set? Sure. All right, I'm Robert De Niro. We're cooking some food. It was like, it was a very young version, so I was like, I'm Robert De Niro. But that is how, after years of doing shows, different shows, news shows, entertainment, movie review shows, I mean, you kind of understand this was a direct connection to the golden age of television.
Yeah.
To me, that's what local TV is.
It's the only place you can learn.
You can learn everything.
George Burns said it years ago, there's no place to be bad anymore. And that's the case. If you went into a local station
Right.
today and say, I'll work for free, but can I do this? They'd say, absolutely not.
Right. Because we're going to get in trouble. We have to pay you. Also, get out of here.
Yeah, get out of here. And now,
Because
and back,
do it at home.
I did a kid show in Indianapolis called Popeye and Janie. And I would do shtick, and you knew if you made the cameraman laugh that
Right.
you were doing
That's
well.
it.
Okay?
Yep.
But now all the cameras are robotic cameras.
That's right.
So you're in the studio by yourself,
Yeah.
or maybe with a stage manager.
Yep.
It's like being in church.
It's true.
And you cannot interact with anybody.
No.
Therefore, your reaction is different. And I don't even know how the news people do it. I mean, you're sitting there talking to these silly cameras that half
Yeah.
the time bump into each other and are out of focus. But it just drives
It's
me
true.
crazy.
My friend Raymond Chavez Jr., who today is the anniversary of his passing. Raymond Chavez was my producer and partner in crime at the Chino Public Access Studio. And Raymond was my camera too. And I got this from old TV. I was obsessed with the concept of a host bickering with some guy that you never saw off camera. That premise is so funny to me.
Yeah, me too.
So it would always, and I started playing this preacher character, the Apostle BG. We had a show called The Holiness Half Hour of Power, and I'd take phone calls. I couldn't even believe
And
that
people
we were
would
on
call in
Yeah,
and-
yeah, Saturday afternoons. This
my.
is by the time we moved from Chino to Eagle Rock. So now we're doing shows in Eagle Rock. And I'd be like, let's take another call. Go ahead, idiot. And these people would call in so upset, and I would read, misinformation from the Bible and wear a bald skull cap and the cigarette.
And they thought it was for real.
They get so mad at me, Then I'd be like, Raymond, man, get it together, man. Shape it up over there, man. What do you do? Zoom in on me, man. Get it. So Raymond, after Raymond passed, which was very untimely and very tragic, it was very sad. And I still miss the guy very dearly because he was the guy that was my producer. He was the guy that would be like, yeah, let's try it this way. He just knew. He wasn't always on camera, but he knew
He was
what
honest.
my strengths were, and he was honest.
Yeah, that's what you need.
And so eventually when I started doing it myself with no crew, the fictional camera guy became Jerry, because Jerry to me is just an inherently funny name.
Right.
There are so many Jerrys in my family.
So you would do shtick with this phony Jerry?
Damn it, Jerry. And really I'm talking to myself.
Right.
Because I'm working the camera as well. Right underneath the camera lens, you can't see me operating
You're actually
everything.
operating the cameras.
Yeah. So I'll be like, damn it, Jerry. Do you know how to focus? Where'd you learn how to do camera, man? So it's just like me talking to myself. But eventually, a guy named Joe Struzzulo, who wrote for The Late Late Show, was, I think, if I remember the story right, he was getting high with a buddy of his and flipping through channels and happened upon the Reverend Apostle BG. And I used to give my email out at the end. Call for prayer, email for prayer. I'm here for you, friends. This guy emails me and says, hey, I write for this late night show. He wouldn't say what it was, but hey, your stuff's pretty funny. What else do you do? And of
Really?
course, I was a real, hothead back then. So I'm like, oh, really? Oh, you do a show, do you? He's like, no, it's the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. We just started out. It was like the first year of the show, I think. And what else do you do? I said, well, I do Arnold Schwarzenegger on the Howard Stern show. Oh, cool. I'll get back to you. Next thing I know, he's written a sketch for me where I call in to the show. You don't see me, but I call in voice only to talk to Craig Ferguson. So I went down to CBS Television City, which, my God, is steeped in history. And I'm losing my mind because there's murals of Carol Burnett and Red Skelton, and I'm like, All in the Family. I'm like, what is this? And, I mean, it's amazing. So the sketch went well. All right, good stuff. Well, maybe we'll try something again next time. Suddenly, I'm in a muscle suit. And they're putting, 2-hour makeup with these appliances to make my face look like Arnold. And I'm doing on-camera sketches with Craig Ferguson, and that was 2007.
That's amazing. Guys, I'm going to hold 2 seconds. I'm going to pee like a racehorse.
Well, that's the end of our show. Take care, everybody. While Marc's out, this is not even real. You're not recording any of this.
So, how did the robot thing happen from Arnold Schwarzenegger?
It's funny. The thing is, people don't realize that I was on the Late Late Show for quite a long time before that robot came into existence.
Really?
I was doing the Schwarzenegger stuff. We did a lot of Schwarzenegger sketches. Thanks to Joe. I mean, Joe wrote almost all of those sketches. And Howard, Craig, it's me, Arnold, checking in from the Capitol. Because thankfully, by that point, he was the governor of California. So, listen, Craig famously used to play the Queen, rest in peace. One time there's a sketch where I'm the Queen, and having tea with De Niro. So I'm just sitting there going, stop talking. I don't like you. And I got this giant mole on my face. And I would play other characters. And, of course, I would do Morgan Freeman occasionally as a voiceover.
So the night that Morgan Freeman's there, he says, I got this guy who does you.
Yeah, he's like, Jeff the Robot,
yes.
By that point had come along. And it's like, Jeff here does Morgan Freeman. And Morgan's like, did he? Does he? Well, I'd like to hear it. And so I say, would you like to hear my Morgan Freeman voice? And, you can see the video. It's on YouTube.
Yep.
Morgan's face his eyes pop out of his head. That's outstanding, Jeff. So right after we did that, Craig very graciously brought Morgan Freeman over to where I was hidden away.
Right, because all he saw is the robot.
Yeah, there's, by design.
Yes.
It's like, look, and honestly, to his credit, it was the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, right? It's a big deal to bring some dude in and have him be the sidekick.
Right.
But I just want to be clear that I didn't just come off the street. I had sort of proved myself for a couple of years in sketches. Yeah, so we started improvising, and we did have that sort of chemistry that, you just can't plan for.
No, either happens or it doesn't.
And so Craig originally was doing the voice of the robot pre-recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And his version was very much like this. And the whole thing was, it's just going to be a robot that I've programmed to laugh at all my jokes. It's the send-up, it's the satirization, obviously, of the sidekick, because it's a show without a sidekick. And the late Grant Imahara from Mythbusters, an incredible roboticist and genius who also worked on the Star Wars films, he built Jeff the Robot. He was an incredible guy, Grant Imahara, and he showed me how to puppeteer the whole thing. So one day, Craig's like, I'm tired of doing it, man. He gets tired of things very quickly. He had a sound machine for a while on the show, got rid of that.
Gone.
I don't want to do that anymore, man. We did sketches. I don't want to do sketches anymore. So I thought Jeff the Robot was going to last a week. So one day he says, hey, man, maybe this weekend, if you have any thoughts about if you want to try to do a voice or something, just think about it. I don't know, man. We'll try it out. It's probably not going to work. Really downplaying it. It's probably not going to go. But we'll see, man. Just give it. Okay, sure. So for about a year and a half, I came in every couple of weeks and pre-recorded phrases for Jeff. So there was a writer named Tom Straw who wrote like bulls and in your pants and all that stuff. I'd just come in, in your pants, bulls. I'd buy that for $1, whatever the hell it was. And then I'd leave. And then all of Jeff's movements were matched to different phrases that they could activate on an iPad. So they just stand back there and he'd go, ha, ha, like that. Well, one day we're in Vegas. Craig and I are in Vegas shooting a sketch. It's a parody of The Hangover, where Craig and Jeff the Robot wake up and they have to recount what happened to them that weekend. We're driving in a 57 Chevy being pulled on a camera truck, And I'm hidden behind. So now I have a remote control for the first time. and I'm hidden in the back seat of a 57 Chevy. I have to lie down. They have a blanket over me. And sitting on me is this little person named Brad Lace, dressed as a leprechaun. So it's Jeff driving the car, wearing a wedding gown, Craig sitting in the passenger seat, Brad sitting on top of me, and I'm essentially acting as the seat. Nobody can see me. I got a headset, and I got an earpiece, and I'm improvising with Craig in a 57 Chevy as we're being pulled down the Las Vegas Strip. And I started making him laugh so hard because what I would do, and I knew he didn't want to be there. He was tired. We'd shot for so long. All right, that's enough, man. Let's go home. And as Jeff, I just started busting his balls.
If
And
you
it
like
was,
that.
and because the big TV host wants to go home. Do you want to take a nap? You want a milk and cookies? What are you pulling in? 30 million? You'll do what you're told. Cry, baby. Look at me. I can't even walk. He just started
to lose it.
crying, and everyone else. I mean, the crew's like,
They were nervous, I
holy
bet.
shit.
Yeah.
What is he doing? That was it.
And
And
that
what's
turned it
funny
around.
is I had been trying for a year to convince the producers. Every couple of months I'd say, hey, what if we try it live in studio once? No, Craig's never going to go for that. Okay. A couple months later. Hey, remember that thing I was talking about? All right, what if we just try it one time and see how it goes, and I'll never bring it up again? No, Craig's never going to go for that. It's a terrible idea. Don't ever bring it up to him. Don't ever bring it up to him. In fact, if you mention it, I'm sure he'll be upset about it. Okay, we're in Vegas. Everything goes well. First thing Craig says to me, you know what we should do? We should do this live in studio.
See,
So
you
that was
got to
it.
take a chance.
Have to.
I'm doing a show called The Home Show on ABC. And I get called to fill in for a guy, okay? And they call me, they go, I just want to let you know this guy is on vacation. You're going to come in, you're going to do one shot. I know who you are. I had a reputation that I would drive people crazy. And I used to have producers say, I'll hire you if you promise to stop calling me, okay? So I got called in to do the show. The guy's name was Howie Stevens, and I filled in for Howie Stevens. And what I had to do was go to West Virginia and award this woman a $10,000 check that she won on this contest.
Okay.
So I get there, and we're live, and I knock on her door, and you won the so-and-so contest. Here's $10,000. Applause, applause, applause. We'll see more when we come back. They go to commercial. We come back, and the lady says, gee, I always wanted to meet Gary Collins, and I'm on live TV, and I go, you know what, Gary, what we should do? I'm flying back this afternoon. Why don't I put her in the plane with me? Why don't we fly back together? Okay, and the Woody Frazier, Cleveland, in my ear
Yep.
says, very smart, great job, we'll do that. And in fact, I want you on the show tomorrow with her, okay? I became a regular on the show for the next 5 years
Yep.
because I took a chance on live television and
Yeah.
rolled the dice, and it paid
Yeah,
off.
the instinct.
The instinct, you got to
You
know
knew
when
it.
to do that. It worked for you, and it worked for me.
Pick your moment.
And most people are too damn scared to roll those dice and go for it.
What are you going to lose? What are
You're
you going to
nothing.
lose?
You got
Okay.
nothing anyway.
Right.
Go
right.
for it.
I'm sitting in the back of a car with a little person sitting on top of me. I got nothing. So that led to me being Jeff, and that led to we'll try it out once a week. We'll try it out once a week. We'll see how it goes. So
Then it
every
became-
Friday, Jeff was live. That was like the big thing, and then that was it. Then it was like, oh, we can't go back now.
No. And how many years did you do that?
So that I think 2010 to the last show was December 2014, but I was on the show since 2007.
So that was a great run.
So it was an amazing run, and it was an incredible experience.
I found an article here about you, and I love this stuff you said about the early days.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about that. But you say, when I created something, it was just for me. It was purely about creating for the sake of creating.
Yeah.
Most people don't do that anymore.
No,
You're
man.
always reporting to somebody. And, if you want to make a living and pay the mortgage and all that stuff, sometimes you have to do what you don't want to
Yeah.
do. But is that still how you're thinking today?
It's harder to get into that mindset because of social media,
Yeah.
but I'm so close to getting back to that. And what I always remember is public access TV. We didn't know what our ratings were. We didn't know who was watching.
We didn't care.
We never heard from anybody.
Yeah.
Didn't matter. Exactly. We just made things that were exciting to us.
Yeah.
And so now I have a decade's worth of 3/4-inch tapes in my house that I'm currently digitizing.
I was going to say.
And I go, wow, this is, even if no one ever sees these, this is a real accomplishment. You got to make it for yourself first. It's not selfish.
No.
It's just that's the way it should be. You can't worry about likes and favorites and going viral.
I went to school with a guy by the name of Paul Fusco, and Paul Fusco was a magician, but he was also a puppeteer. And so he created this crazy puppet. How many years ago was it now? Jesus, 30-some years ago. And he brought it to my house, and he showed it to my kids. And it was this weird-looking thing. And he said, I'm going to a Christmas party. Will you come with me to the Christmas party with this puppet? I said, you're going to walk into a Christmas party with people who don't know with this puppet? And he goes, yeah. And so he takes the puppet, and he walks up to, and he's just insulting everybody. He's like being a Don Rickles. It was Alf. It was the first time Alf.
My God.
Yeah. Paul created Alf. And
Yeah.
he took that, and when he talks about the audition, they were in Brandon Tartikoff was in the meeting, and Bernie Brillstein was his manager, and they were pitching this puppet show, and nobody really wanted a puppet show.
Yeah.
So he brings Alf in a garbage bag, and Bernie sees that it's going in the toilet, and he says, Paul, just bring the thing out. So he brings the puppet out. The first thing he does, he goes right next to Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Alf picks his nose and rubs it on Brandon. The show was sold
Awesome.
at that moment.
That's how it goes.
But you have to take that chance of picking your nose
Yeah.
as a puppet and rubbing it on the highest executive at NBC.
You do.
But if you don't do that, the odds of it happening are slim.
Because
and
they're
minor.
not gonna come looking for you.
We talk on the show a lot about overcoming obstacles. Another line, I have so many things here that you say that I just love. I think many of the obstacles I faced were self-imposed, telling myself that I was a failure, not believing that I was ever good enough or funny enough or interesting enough.
Yeah.
How has that changed, or has it?
I mean, I still I wouldn't say I struggle with it. It's certainly not like it used to be, but yeah. I mean, look, when the Late Late Show ended, I thought everything was going to go one way.
Yeah.
I thought, oh well, this is it, man. I mean, I was Jeff Peterson. You know, the industry is going to go, get me Jeff Peterson on the phone. But it turns out like nobody knew who I was. Now, you know, we'll go into that in a different show. But, you know, there was a lot of politics around the Late Late Show, and there was a lot of reasons why I remained behind the wall. And, you know, I loved being that character. I loved it dearly. But I also wanted to come out from behind the walls. So, you know, when I couldn't get work immediately after, I felt like, oh, I guess
It's over.
it's over for me.
Yeah, you say here, I pretended to be somebody else, which is essentially how I built my entire career. Yeah, you have, but it's been a damn good career.
Absolutely. It's even like just meeting you. This is an incredible, fortuitous thing, but I'm not surprised by it because, like, I'm friends with Shadow Stevens, and when I did the Late Late Show, I got to sit and talk with Carol Burnett and, you know, Bob Newhart and Dick Van Dyke, and, you know, of course, I'm over the moon because these are all the people I really want to talk to.
The best.
And I remember Carol Burnett requested to talk to me after being a guest because she loved, who's the fella doing that robot?
Really?
And so she hugged me and whispered in my ear, "You're now part of the club." That's the greatest moment in my showbiz life.
Yeah, that's pretty
you
cool.
know. So I feel like my point of that is I think we're all kind of connected. We're sort of drawn to each other, and I have such a reverence for TV and variety shows and local TV that it just makes sense that, you know, one day, hey, Marc Summers is emailing me. You know, I was so excited about that. But it's good to talk to you in this moment in time in my life because it's years. I mean, the bad period was years and years ago. I'm such a much happier, more relaxed person. And like you say, you really look at what you've accomplished and you go, this is pretty amazing. I mean,
It is.
to have created a character like Jeff, just for example, that is still remembered to this day and changed so many people's lives, that means so much to me. To still hear stories to this day from people who lost a job or a parent passed away or whatever, and it got them through these terrible times. Even now, they watch reruns on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, and all I ever wanted was for people to know that it was me. But even now, it doesn't really matter.
You know what? You
I
find
mean?
that to be the case. Somebody said to me, you know, once you're off television for 3 years, people forget who you are.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so I've been off television for about 3 years.
Right.
And I've noticed that fewer and fewer people come up to me.
Right.
By the way, that's the best thing ever.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Well, yeah, because you were on camera.
I was on camera.
I got to be hidden.
Yes,
So-
I was on camera for many years. Started in 1986 up until a couple of years ago. You know, first it was all the Nickelodeon stuff. Then I was at Food Network for 20 years, and you know, things pop up. Thing that's interesting is because of Paramount Plus, they have 320 episodes of Double Dare that air, and then Unwrapped streams every night on Discovery Plus. And
yeah.
so it's kind of you're never going to go away,
Right.
except you see my hair color change,
Yeah,
over
yeah.
the years. But you start realizing what's important and what's not important.
That's it.
And somebody coming up and saying, "Can I take a picture with you?" or "Can I have your autograph?" is really irrelevant.
Yeah,
It's about so many other things. And so,
Absolutely.
how old are you?
I am 47.
Okay, 47.
Yeah.
So I'm 70. Okay, and I've been doing this a hell of a long time.
Yeah.
And it's the best fun any human could have, because I always say I never felt like I worked a day in my life.
Right.
And so I have zero complaints. Did I have down times? Was I depressed, as I used to say? Was I lower than whale shit? No question about
Absolutely,
it.
yeah.
When I was at the Comedy Store and thought I was funnier than a lot of other people, until you walk in and I used to see Letterman or George Miller or Jay or Shandling or all these guys, and I went, I'm not that funny.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to be that funny.
Right.
So what's plan C?
It's comforting to just accept that, though.
Oh, I had to.
You go, well, I'm
'cause-
not going to be the greatest comedian in the world.
No. I had a pretty solid 18 minutes, and then I got called to go do a college date, and I needed an hour.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, Jesus, now what do I
You
do?
take that 18 minutes and you make it an hour.
Know what I did? I brought out my old magic props.
Perfect.
And I did magic and comedy.
Yeah.
Or what I thought was comedy.
Yeah.
And I knew I was best. I wasn't a good actor. I did a sketch on Donnie and Marie, and I did some extra stuff on Soap. I was best at being myself.
Yeah.
And that's
yeah.
why the hosting thing worked best for me. I'm good at being Marc Summers, but I'm not pretty good at doing much of anything else.
See, and I'm good at being other people, but now I want to be myself. But I would say there's no more harshness to me. There's certain, and I think the difference between you and me in terms of like the downtime or the dark periods is I had social media, so
Yeah.
I would go live and I would talk to people. Sometimes after I had a couple of drinks, but it was not a good thing, but it was also a really good thing because a lot of people remarked that they enjoyed that. It made me more human for them, and people connected with the depression and the sadness. Like, depression isn't sexy, right?
No.
It's not like having an addiction to alcohol or drugs. Like when you come back from it and you're recovered, everyone goes, "That's right."
You're right.
Depression or anger, it's not sexy. It's not sellable.
Well, that's it. When
know?
I came out with OCD, I couldn't get arrested. I got fired from every job I was supposed to have.
Right.
Because you could be a drug addict or you can be an alcoholic, but there's something wrong with your mind. And,
what are
then
you
they start
talking
spreading
about?
rumors that I was crazy and all that other kind
Right.
of stuff. And so that stuff happens.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out, okay, how do I reinvent myself?
That's exactly it.
And it's hard. So what's the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome in your career?
I think it's myself. I think it's my own view of myself. I think the biggest one for me was listening to negative comments, taking things to heart and using those things to inform my career. Like social media for a couple of years really laid me out.
Yeah, you can't
It was
read that
like,
stuff.
oh
You
no,
can't.
I can't. Now I have a whole different relationship. It's
Yeah.
like, here's something I'm doing, take care, and then I run away.
When I did the Tonight Show and got in a fight with Burt Reynolds, and
Yeah.
everybody thought it was fake. And so,
Yeah.
every 6 months or 3 months or whenever, it pops up a line, oh, this was all fake, this was all set up. And about 1 million times I went, okay, it was not set up. It was honest to God.
feel
I'm
like
not
you
that good of
got
an
it.
actor. I couldn't
Right.
have pulled it off. Oh, it's bullshit, all this other kind of stuff. I finally realized, just stop reacting.
There it
because,
is.
even when you tell them exactly what happened, they don't believe you.
Doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter.
right.
And therefore, I'll tell you one story, and then you and I will talk here.
It's
for
a
hours.
5-part show.
Yeah, it turns in. So I live up in Santa Barbara, and through quirky events, I get my mail the same place that Dennis Miller gets his mail. And so one day, after doing a few drive-bys, I said to him, "Why don't we have lunch?" Now I was scared to death because celebrities scare the shit out of me,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, Jesus, now what am I going to do? I'm actually going to have to go and sit and talk with him. So that was about 6-7 months ago. Every Wednesday, Dennis Miller and I have lunch.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Which is
Wow.
a big thrill for me because he's about the smartest human I've ever met.
Really,
I
yeah.
have to bring a thesaurus, a dictionary, and an encyclopedia because his frame of references are so bright.
Yeah.
The other day, all this craziness is going on with the former president.
Mm-hmm.
And Dennis is a little more, let's say, to the right than I am, but he's not as right as most people would think that he is. He's just a brilliant, nice, wonderful man. And I asked him a question. I said, I need some help here. He said, what do you need help on? I said, I don't understand the point of view of certain people who are supporting this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me out? And he said, you know what, Mark? I look forward to these lunches every Wednesday. And if we get into this discussion, there's nothing good that can come out of it. And by the way, it won't change a thing, and it really doesn't matter.
That's exactly right.
So why don't we just not have that conversation?
Smart.
And I said, you know what, Dennis, I kind of thought that's what you were going to say.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of glad you did. And then we just started talking. We talk show business for 2 hours every Wednesday.
And you're so right. People have already decided
yes.
what they think about a thing or about you.
You can't change their mind. I don't care how much you try.
And I spent too many years, thankfully not anymore, trying to convince everybody to like me. And here's the thing. Not everyone's going to like you.
No.
You know? I know that now, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's such a weird thing, and I think social media is hyper-realized in a way it's not good for the creative spirit.
It's very difficult.
You know, but I listen, I love Marc Summers, so I'd love to talk to you sometime, Marc. You're a great guy. Let's have lunch. We should have lunch. I'll set it up. It's going to be so great. It's going to be so great.
If I want to find you on the World Wide Web, as they say, where shall I go and find you?
Well, I think my website, if people still use that, The JRT Show.
Got it.
JRT Show was taken. TheJRTShow.com and Twitter. You'll find all my stuff on my website.
This has been a ball. We will carry on with this conversation for many weeks to come. As a sign-off, could you just, as Morgan Freeman say, Mark, thanks for having me, and I'll see you soon.
Well, Marc Summers, I just want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for having me on this show. What the hell's the name of this show? Unwrapped?
Something like that.
Wrap it
Summers
up.
Unwrapped.
Keep it wrapped. Marc Summers, Keep It Wrapped, which is, I thought, a show about safe sex. But anyway, Marc Summers, you're one of my favorites. And God bless. Take care of yourself. And I swear, if any slime comes out this ceiling, I'm going to sue your ass. Take care. Bye-bye.
Marc Summers Unwraps is a production of Believe Limited. Created by me, Marc Summers, and Jessica Richmond. Produced by Keith Corneluk and Jessica Richmond. Executive produced by Patrick James Lynch and Ryan Gielen. Post-production support from Joshua Sterling Bragg and Believe Limited. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast player, and if you really love it, why don't you leave us a rating and a review? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Marc Summers Unwraps.